Frozen sent me their Sonic Mighty 8K to test, and this is what I printed. This is Groundeffected. My name is your dad. And welcome to 3D printing in 8K. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how I 3D printed and painted this Catwoman sculpted by CA 3D Studios. I would like to say a quick thank you to CA 3D Studios for supplying me with the files for this print because I was in a bit of a pickle and I needed a model to paint and they came through. Thank you so much for that. There will be a link for their Patreon in the description below, as well as for the sponsors of this video, which is Frozen. Like I said, they sent me their Sonic Mighty 8K and I've been using it for over 2 weeks now, and I can say with certainty this is now honestly one of my favorite machines, and I cannot say that about many machines. However, this machine has taken the spot of all the spots. There was a lot of waffle. I'm not gonna waffle anymore. Let's get straight into how I painted this glorious Catwoman, and let's just do it. After cleaning and curing my models, I'm gonna paint them with a primer layer, and this primer layer is Citadel black paint from Citadel spray paint can. I'm then gonna use a dry brush technique to paint this base. This base is meant to be some kind of stony, kind of statue-y kind of thing, but basically it's pretty much just a rock gargoyle statue stone base thing. So I'm gonna start off with grey at first. This is desaturated. Yes, I know this, but we're just trying to build some volumes, and that's it right now. After that grey dry brushing, I'm gonna go back in with Gnome Oil Wash, which will fill all the crevices and make the crevices look a little bit darker, which is exactly what we want. Be careful when doing this step that you don't leave major pools on the model, because this will leave ugly coffee staining everywhere. Now to bring some color into this piece, I'm gonna take this green shade and I'm gonna spray it just into a couple of areas, mainly focusing around kind of joint areas and things like that, just to get a little bit more life into it. I'm gonna use Tarfus Corrosion in a couple of spots as well, just to add a bit of muddied sort of areas where a bit of dirt is left behind. Now to add a little bit more life and a little bit more age to this model, and this is going to be adding a little bit of moss. This kind of indicates that the statue or this piece of material has just been living out in the elements for a very long time. Moss doesn't really grow in a couple of days. Then I added a little bit of Cygor Brown over all the roots that are on this base. There is a couple of roots that are growing through it, and I feel like this obviously indicates the age, as well as all the cracks and everything in it. This gives off the age. For the base, I like to make a picture on the base that nobody will ever see, and this is because I know that it looks good underneath there. It also covers up those holes, and for some reason I've got it in my head that this is quicker than filling the holes and sanding the base. This is how the base looks so far, and I'm pretty happy with the results. The Frozen Sonic Mighty 8K is the perfect machine for those looking to bridge the gap between large scale and precision printing. On the Sonic Mighty 8K, I'm able to fit a whole lot more models on one build plate, including large size statue model thing pieces. Here you can see how productive this machine actually is, just how many parts I'm able to fit on the build plate, as well as how large you can print on most of these things. That is fantastic. Now using a lighter green, I'm going to go back over some of the areas just to add a bit more highlight to that moss on the statue thing. Basically, this is just to simulate light hitting some of the edges. I don't want this to be any of the darker areas, I only want this on the top highlight areas. Then going back with a bit of white just over some of the edges to make the piece look a little bit more drier and stone-like. Now for the cat that's sitting at the back of this model, I'm going to keep the black base underneath and I'm going to spray a grey mixed with a blue kind of tone, and this is going to be sprayed over the top just to create some highlights. I'm then going to spray Null Oil from the bottom, which will darken up the shadows a little bit and smooth off the gradients that I had laid down earlier. Very carefully, I'm going to spray a bit of white into his ears, very thin down, and I'm going to paint his eyes white first. I then used a bright pinkish skin tone color to paint the ears on the inside, and I also used Imperial Fist Yellow from Citadel to paint the eyes, which is extremely bright and yellowful. To work on her skin, I'm going to start out with reddish flesh from the Fairy Flesh set series. I'm going to spray this on and make sure that it is solid before I even move any further. This will take a couple of coats, especially if you're working from black like I am. You probably would be better off starting off with the grey base rather than black, as this will take a few less coats. I then use natural flesh and I spray that from the top mainly as a highlight coming from as if it was the lights above her face or whatever you want to call it. Basically the lights come from top, and I just do this for most models. It just is easier and it seems to just be a universal look for everything. Here you can see how the paint looks dried, and this is just before we move on to highlighting that skin a little bit more. I'm going to use a brighter color now to highlight certain extremities on the face. This is going to be things like the collarbones, the chin, the tip of the nose, some a bit over the brow, not too much, a little bit over the high points of her cheeks, and this is what the model will look like at this point now. I'm going to spray that with a clear varnish to just let it set and dry while I start working on the suit for this chick. Spraying from the top again where the light is coming from, I'm going to mix blue and black, and I'm going to spray this just to build some volume at first. Once I've built some volumes on some of the higher points where the light would hit, I'm going to slowly start mixing a bit more blue into my mix. This will start to bring a bit more color into the piece. Yes, it's going to take away from the black a little bit, but we'll bring that black back again. After we've let all this dry, we're going to spray in a shade underneath from the shadows, and this will help bring that black, making it look a little bit more darker. Those words don't even work. And this will help bring the black back into the suit. Again, this is just a reverse of how I painted the highlights on. I'm spraying this from the bottoms, but this time I'm going to make sure that I'm paying attention to undersides of things like folds and armpits and areas like that. Now to give a little bit more color to this, I'm going to spray a purple tone over the top of this, just because I don't want it to be just pure black and only bluish kind of grey. I just feel like this purple will give it a little bit more something to look at and have a little bit more rich volume to the piece itself. Going back to the skin tones again, now that that clear coat is dried, I can start using washes to start bringing out some of the skin tone colors of the skin. Starting out with the yellow, I'm going to put this all over the place and really wipe off every single last bit. I mainly just want to tint the skin at this point. I don't really want to put any wash down that is left in a crevice. This is not how you wash normally. You don't actually want to leave anything anywhere because you are just trying to tint the color of the skin at this point. I then spray a highlight over the top areas. This will just help to bring in some of that brighter skin tone over the top of these layers, and this is just going to really start to help actually build the volume and make it look like the face has more volume to it. Now for the final wash, and that is going to be the blue wash. This one I didn't mix too dark this time because I didn't want to actually add too much shadows to this. I wanted it to look a little bit lighter skin tone. Because of the dark suit, it really is going to stand out quite nicely. I used Resin Flesh Shade to accentuate certain parts. This is mainly around the outside of her hat that she's wearing, and also on the inside of her nose, and an undercoat on her lips as well. Very carefully I used matte black to go over her hat thing and basically paint a base coat of black so that I can do the same thing that I did on her suit to her head. Now for this, you could probably mask this out, which might be a bit better if you are not very comfortable with your airbrush, but I'm fairly comfortable with the airbrush now and pretty much just sprayed this, trying to be really careful not to get any paint or overspray onto anything else. Then I worked on the eyes, and this is just a matter of putting down a black coat first and allowing that to dry. Whilst that was drying, I painted the lenses of her goggles that are on her hat, and I started to give them a little bit of light shape thing. What do you call this? It's a highlight? Yes, I gave it a highlight. This I did by just incrementally mixing white into the grey that I used to paint the base coat with. I then used black to go over the outside of the goggles. You can now see that the black stands off of that and helps those goggles to stand out. I used silver to go over her zipper. And I went back to the face again and painted a highlight skin tone, which is kind of white, into her eyes. And this is just to give the actual shape of the whites of her eyes. I then used Cygor Brown to paint her hair. This is the base tone for her hair, and pretty much painted this over everything, just one single coat. But because this is a contrast color, what actually tends to happen is that it will go darker in the creases and lighter on the edges. But just to help push that a little bit more, I'm going to use a lighter brown over the top of that, just to push some of the highlights a little bit brighter on the hair. For her lips, I used Magos Purple, and I painted this in 2 layers over her lips. I made sure to leave my brush strokes on the edge of the lip so that around the edge of the lip was a little bit darker than the center of the lip. I then used Tamiya Clear to paint over her visors. Because this is a glass paint, I thought that it would be a good idea to use this over the visors. However, I didn't think far ahead enough that I was actually going to gloss paint it anyway and then cut back, and never mind. It doesn't matter. I used that color, it works, it looks okay. Thank you for watching. Let's carry on painting this model. For the eyes, I did the cheat again. I cheated again, and I just used water slide decals. I did make a video for this for my Patreons. If you are a Patreon, you will have a video that goes more into depth about making these on the Patreon, available to those from the 2nd tier and up. Sticking these things is a bastard. I'm not really sure if it actually works out easier to do this or to just paint them. In general, I would probably just paint them. However, I felt like it would look good on this model, and I decided to try doing it at 1/6 scale just to make sure. But you can see I'm struggling. These things are so tiny, not even the smallest tweezers can grab them. I added a little highlight of white to the eyes, and this is just going to give a little bit more life to them, and that is where I called this model done. Hopefully you managed to take something out of this video that will help you print and paint your own models. Resin printing can be a messy and tedious task, but it does yield very glorious results at the best of times. Of course, if you want to support this channel and you like these kind of videos and you'd like to see more in the future, then maybe look at my Patreon and help support this channel make more futures in the video. This also keeps the lights blinding my eyeballs and the videos to keep coming. I would like to say a super special thank you to the current patrons for all your support and for keeping the eyeballs blinding. This is fantastic. And now we are at the best part of any video that I ever make, and this is where I get to tell you, if you didn't like what you saw in the video, just fuck off. Sounds like the printer's done. I'm gonna go put another build plate full of models onto my machine.